Let's talk about creative selling techniques. You know, everybody knows how to do exactly what it says in the company manual. You know, we know how to send an email, make a phone call, knock on a door, talk to a person, following the way that we've been trained to sell. But what about sales opportunities that aren't directly in the path of making a call on somebody? Years ago, when I was very young, I got a job selling donuts, pastries, door to door for a local donut shop back in Arkansas in the United States where I grew up. And what I would do is early in the morning, like 6 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, I would have my mother or dad either drive me to the donut shop or I would ride my bicycle to the donut shop. And I'd get there while they were still making the donuts, and the donuts that were coming out of the oven or out of the system were very hot and just delicious. And they would package the donuts, 6 to a package. And then they would give me a basket that I could carry, and they would put packages of donuts in the basket. And so I'd carry a big supply of donuts, and then I would leave and go from door to the houses near the donut shop, knock on the door, and say, would you like to buy some fresh donuts for this morning? And so if I started early in the day, I made more sales because donuts are breakfast food more than a treat during the day. And so people were used to having donuts and coffee in the morning, and that was very good, especially if I could make the calls early enough that the donuts were still warm when I made the sale. And on every sale, I would sell the donuts. This was US dollars a long time ago. I would sell a half dozen donuts for 30 cents, less than $1 US. 30 cents, and I got to keep a nickel, 5 cents out of that sale. And I would go door to door and try to sell my donuts. And I always sold the donuts because I'd call on houses until I'd finally sold the last one. And then I would go back to the shop and get some more and go a different direction and make more calls. Well, I did this day after day, a couple of days a week. And one day my father said to me, son, how come you don't sell donuts here in our neighborhood where we live? I said, well, it's too far to walk. He said, well, you have a basket on the front of your bicycle. You could, put the donuts in there and go door to door. I said, well, yeah, but that's too far from the shop. He said, here's an idea. He said, why don't you go talk to all of our neighbors? These are people that you know and they know you because they've seen you playing here for several years. Go to the people you know and ask them, how would you like to have fresh, warm donuts for breakfast tomorrow? And make the sale today and go get the donuts tomorrow and deliver them. And I said, well, that's a good idea. And so what I did the next day was not selling day for donuts. Next day was selling day for orders for donuts. So I went up and down my street and all the neighboring streets where I knew somebody, and I knocked on the doors and I said, would you like hot, fresh donuts tomorrow morning? And the tomorrow was usually a Saturday or a Sunday, a weekend day. And many people said, yes, that sounds wonderful. And they would place their order. And then I would call the donut shop and I would say, I have orders for 25 dozen donuts for tomorrow morning. Can you have them ready for me when I get to the shop? Well, the donut shop was very impressed and they said, yes, absolutely. And so I would go with my mother. She would drive the car and I would go to the donut shop early in the morning on Saturday and I'd pick up all the donuts and then take them to the neighborhood and deliver them while they're still hot and fresh. My neighbors loved it. I did that 2 days a week, every week. And I had a regular clientele. In other words, a regular set of customers who were used to buying from me. They trusted me. And I knew how many sales I was going to make. And I could increase the number of sales if I could think of other ways to sell something else. Either sell to a new person or sell something else to the same person. because the donut shop had different types of products. They had muffins, donuts, croissants, all kinds of different things. So that became my creative selling technique, my way of changing from going door to door with a basket of donuts to going door to door, taking orders, and then having the sales made in advance. Many years later, when I became a professional speaker and I had been traveling the world giving speeches and seminars, I was in Silicon Valley, the famous technological area of Northern California. And I checked into a hotel, and as I walked through the hotel lobby, there was a large TV screen and a nice-looking woman on the screen. And she said, "Good afternoon." And I said, "Good afternoon." And I looked at the screen, and there was a woman on the screen talking to me. And I said, "Is this for real?" She said, "Yes, it is." And I said, "Wow, where are you?" And she said, "I'm 90 miles away at my home, in my office." I said, and see, now, that was a big deal at the time. Today it might not be so exciting to you. I mean, with Skype and with WeChat and with all the things that we've done with technology for web conferencing and so forth. Today, okay, I understand. But this was in the 1990s. And no one was doing live video long distance at that time. So I'm walking through the lobby of this hotel, and the television set says to me, "Good afternoon." And it's Anna Morris. And Anna Morris lives in a city 90 miles away from this television set in the hotel lobby. And I said, "You obviously have a very good story to tell. Would you mind telling it to me?" She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I work as a professional speaker and a sales trainer, and I teach people how to sell and how to do creative things as salespeople. How did this come about?" She said, "Well, I used to work in the hotel. I'm the concierge." She said, "It was my job to greet everybody who came in and to solve their problems and to find, creative products or experiences that would appeal to them." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, one day I was sitting here and a salesperson came in and he said, 'Hey, where's the business office? I need to make a call on the hotel manager.' And she said, 'It's right back here. I'll direct you. What is it you're selling?' And he said, 'Video services.' And she said, 'How does that work?' And he explained it to her, and then he set up the video and showed her how they could connect with someone in a remote location and have a live conversation. She said, "Wow." And then she started thinking. Now he went in, he made his presentation to the hotel, did not make a sale. Anna, in the meantime, started thinking, "I have a problem. What's my problem? I live 90 miles away. Okay, I live 90 miles away. I have 2 children at home, and I need to spend more time with my children. I love my job. I don't want to quit this job and get work nearer to my home. I want to continue to do this job. How can I do that?" Video conferencing. What? So she called the salesperson. She said, "Could this be set up in the hotel lobby so that I could see the people as they're coming and going through your camera, and I could talk to them through my camera at my home 90 miles away?" He said, "Yes." She said, "How long could that happen?" He said, "You could leave it on for hours." "Would it be outrageously expensive?" He said, "No." And she calculated the costs of buying the equipment or leasing the equipment. She calculated the cost of using the equipment, having it turned on for a long period of time. She made a list of all the things that she did for customers, and she said, "These things can be done from my home. These few things have to be done in person. I can find another person in the hotel to do these few things, and I'll do these many things from my location." She went to her boss, the hotel general manager, and she said, "I have a proposal." And she told him about the idea and sold him on doing that so that he could keep her as a valued concierge, and she could at the same time have the happiness of being at home most of the time. A couple of days a week she came to the hotel, as always, and worked in the hotel so that she was there with all the other people. The rest of the days she was home with her children, but still greeting customers and still doing something very creative. See, Anna was thinking beyond, but Anna was also paying attention. She noticed this is something new and unique. She asked how it worked, and then she was reflecting on that later, and she thought, hey, I've got a thought. And she transformed her world. She became the first virtual concierge in the world. It was her idea. She became the first one in the world. She was interviewed on news shows on television and the radio and in the newspapers and online. She became famous for being the first virtual concierge. And it all came from her wanting to spend more time with her family and less time driving to and from work. What problems could you solve creatively by doing that kind of thinking? My friend Kevin Buck is a philosopher, and he's got a statement that I love. He says, without reflection, there's no real learning. See, learning doesn't take place just by the transfer of information. You know, your teacher in class can give you lots of information. You can write it down. You can memorize it and say the same information back to them. That means you only know it. It doesn't mean you understand it. Or as we say in the States, that doesn't mean you get it. To get it means to understand truly, what is it about this person? What is it about this situation? What's the meaning behind it? So if you want to be more creative for selling, practice these techniques. I have another story I'd like to share with you. This one happened to me. It was Andy Smith of Harley-Davidson Motorcycles. Andy worked at the headquarters of Harley-Davidson Motorcycles in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the United States. And that's where they build most of the Harley-Davidson motorcycles. And Andy called me one day. He said, Jim, this is Andy Smith with Harley-Davidson. Do you remember me? And I said, let me think. Are you the guy who made a presentation telling the story about Harley-Davidson's revival from the hard times to the successful times at the Training and Development Association convention in Orlando? He said, yes, that's me. He said, I sat in your audience that day and you sat in mine. I said, that's correct. I said, well, what caused you to give me a call today? He said, well, Harley-Davidson will soon be celebrating its 100-year anniversary. We were created as a company in 1903, and in the year 2003, we're going to celebrate our 100-year anniversary. It's going to be a big, huge event. We're going to have a big rally in Milwaukee and encourage all the owners of Harley-Davidson motorcycles to ride home to the factory where their bikes were made. And we'll have parties and we'll have performances and concerts and all kinds of wonderful things going on. And we'll give them a tour of the factory. I said, wow, that's exciting. He said, yes. He said, now we're also going to have a separate convention in a different location for the 1,500 dealers who sell Harley-Davidsons all around the world. And I said, well, that's exciting. Where do I come into this? He said, well, we're thinking about you as our keynote speaker for the dealer convention. I said, wow, yes, I'll take it. He said, not so fast. I said, what do you mean, not so fast? He said, well, it's our policy each time we select a speaker to go and hear that speaker presenting to another group. And I said, well, you've already done that. He said, what do you mean? I said, a couple of years ago in Orlando at the training convention, you were in my audience. You heard me speak to another group. He said, yeah. I said, and also, have you been to my website, Cathcart.com? He said, yes. I said, did you watch some of the videos on my website? He said, yes. I said, so you've seen me speak for other groups. So let's confirm this booking. I'm trying to make a sale. And he said, no, it's our policy to come hear you speak. I said, Andy, you don't want to come hear me speak. He said, I don't. I said, no, because if I'm speaking for the hardware dealers of central Nebraska, and you fly to Nebraska and you attend the meeting, you'll see me speaking for them. But at the end of the speech, you're going to walk up to me and say, Jim, that was very good, but it's not what we're looking for. There's a long pause. And Andy said, you know what? You're right.